Hello everybody and welcome back to another 2021 Overwatch League roster breakdown video. Today we are going over the Washington Justice. Justice finished the 2020 season with a record of 4-17 and a minus 33 differential. They finished second to the bottom, the 19 overall spot, though they had a great playoff run at the end of the season after they added Decay late in the season. So the question is, how are they going to bounce back from that late season success? Can they carry that success going forward? And more importantly, can they find more regular season successors where they have been struggling since their inaugural 2019 season? So let's start with the tank line for this team, because I think this tank line is absolutely incredible. Starting with the main tank, we have Mag, who comes out of Contenders Korea, formerly played for Runaway. For basically everybody's money, Mag is the best main tank coming out of Contenders, the best main tank coming into the Overwatch League this season. He is a very good main tank, very consistent. Somebody who realistically could have joined the Overwatch League late last season, because he did become of age during the season, but it was a type of thing where getting the visas for him was a little bit too difficult, I think, for many of the teams, and so most teams had what they needed already, so he was just unable to find a home. But now he is on the Washington Justice, and he gets a pretty good partner to play alongside in the tank line with his new partner, Fury, of course, formerly of the London Spitfire when he won the 2018 Overwatch League season, and then, of course, last season spent with the Philadelphia Fusion. Very good team there. This is a player who has had consistent success at the highest level. 2018 Grand Finals winner, a playoff appearance in 2019, Grand Finals weekend appearance in 2020. So very, very, very high caliber. In my opinion, the best diva in the Overwatch League. He is absolutely one of the best off tanks in the league in general. But in my opinion, he is the best of the best when it comes to that diva role. He is going to be a huge asset for Mag. It's going to be very helpful for Mag to have a second player alongside him who is that upper caliber, upper echelon player. So this tank line is already really, really good. And you have a second off-tank player in Rhea, formerly for the Hangzhou Spark. I think this is an interesting one that a lot of people have been somewhat critical of when the signing was made. Obviously, the signing was done before the signing of Fury, so we didn't really know exactly what was going on. But I do think Rhea has a very good spot on this team, so that's nice to see. One of the things I wanted to kind of make note of is that the head coach for this Justice team is Supreme, who coached the Hangzhou Spark in 2019. It wasn't their head coach, he was just an assistant coach. But this team, the Hangzhou Spark, was really, really good in 2019 when Supreme was a coach there. So you bring over a player like Rhea, who gets to play for a coach he knows, he had experience with, and who was one of the coaches who brought out the best in him as a player. And I think what we see is a very, very, very good potential coming out of Rhea if they do need him for whatever reason. If for whatever reason there's another Sigma Zarya or like Sigma Hog or something like that. Sigma Hog most likely. If it was a Sigma Zarya, you'd probably put Decay in on that Zarya. But if there isn't a time when you need a second off-tank player or Fury just needs a rest or something, I do think Rhea is a very good player to be able to bring in, have him fill in that role. And I think you're going to have some fun there and some luck, and you're not going to have to worry about having like a weak player. So I do think that is Rhea's place on this team, but I don't think he's going to get a ton of playtime just because Fury is such a good flex tank. He's one of the best in the league, and you need a main tank player, and Mag is your go-to guy for that. Luckily, Mag doesn't have really a weak main tank. He can play the Rhine, he can play the Winston, he can play the Ball, he can play the Orisa. Fury can play the Dio, he can play the Zarya, he can play the Hog, he can play the Sigma, so maybe some instances where we'll see some switching between the two if there's a certain meta where one does better than the other, but typically you see a tank line be 2 players, and those 2 players are very rarely subbed out. So I expect Mag and Fury to play pretty much the entire season for this Justice team. There's really not a lot to say about that tank line. I think it's just 2 very good players who we've seen perform at the highest level. And I think that it's going to be cool to see how they do going forward, but I'm excited to see this tank line in action. It is one of my favorite tank lines going into the 2021 season. I think it might be a top 2, definitely top 3 tank line in North America, but I look at this one, I look at the Dallas Fuel tank line, I look at the San Francisco Shock tank line. They're the only ones that I think you can kind of put in that caliber of best in NA. That's how good this tank line is. So really, really solid. Moving on to the support line, that is, I think, where most of the people have some concerns about this Justice team, but I do want to touch on these players and the potential I actually think these players possess, because I actually think this is a better support line than what a lot of people are giving them credit for. When you look at the players they have, Closer and Bebe. Closer, very rough run with the Dallas Fuel. Never looked great with the Fuel. Never looked like he was kind of the central piece for that team. But I feel like you can't judge a player based on how they played when they were with the Dallas Fuel, because the Dallas Fuel were such a dysfunctional team that never really seemed to get things together. Closer was a piece to that London Spitfire roster that won the 2018 Overwatch League season. Now, there's obviously the problem that happened with Closer being benched during the playoffs. They brought Nuss in instead, and there was some swapping between some of these players, but Closer was a key part to that, so he has that experience already playing alongside Fury, as well as playing alongside Decay when they were both with the Dallas Fuel, so he already has some pre-existing synergy with some of these players on this team already, which is very nice and very useful, and something that helps you as you kind of progress forward. So I think he is pretty good. Everything we heard kind of internally, or like the people who were close to the league, most of the reporting on Closer was that he was very impressive in scrims and he played very well. So to me, the way that this team is built, you just need supports that are consistent and that can do their job well. If they're not a liability, you're going to be just fine. And I don't think Closer and Bebe are liabilities. And as I touched on with Rhea, Bebe, when he looked the best, was when he was able to play under Supreme in that 2019 season. So he once again goes back to a head coach that he knows. He has an off-tank that he knows, though he's not the starter, but it is a player he knows. But most importantly, he is a coach that he knows. Bebe was never really bad for the Hangzhou Spark. He was never like a problem for the team. He was a very middle-of-the-pack flex support. Now, as more good flex supports join the league, maybe Bebe has gone from lower top half to, upper lower half to maybe he's slightly lower than that. But once again, he's on a much better team with better pieces, with a coach that has proven himself, with the Justice being very good at the end of the season last season, the Hangzhou Spark being at their best when he was an assistant coach for that team. So I do think that he's able to bring out the best in some of these players, and I think that is one of the key things to look at with this team. This support line is not going to be the star part of this roster, but they don't need to be just because of how good the rest of this roster is. As long as Closer and Bebe can communicate with the team, can step in, do what they need to do, and have an impact for these players and for this team, I think that you're going to see this team find success. It is definitely the biggest question mark, because if they don't perform well, they don't have any substitutes, so you need Closer and Bebe to be good. And yeah, there's some good players out there that they could bring in. They could look to contenders. They could bring in somebody like Sanguinar for that main support role. He's not in the league right now. We've seen Sanguinar have a ton of success. He's been very good, so that's always somebody you could sign. There's tons of flex supports in Korea that have been very, very good recently. You could always bring in someone from there, so there are options. But it is definitely something you have to worry about if you are this Justice team, if you're a Justice fan. Understand that this is going to be the part of your roster to keep the eye on, right? How well does the support line play? They don't have to be great, but they have to be able to keep up with the rest of the team. They have to be able to play their part, and they need to be able to make impacts when the time calls for it. They are never, in my opinion, going to have to be the players making plays all the time, but every so often they may be called upon to do that. And if they can come up big in those few moments that they really need them to come up big, this Justice team is going to be very, very scary. And a big part of why that team is scary is, of course, because of Decay. We saw Decay absolutely dominate people during his period, or during his tenure with the Dallas Fuel last season. Of course, we know how that went with the collapse of the Dallas Fuel. A lot of stuff about that. I've made a whole video on that, so I'm not going to talk about that too much here. But he comes over to the Justice, and they make a very deep playoff run. Now you're giving Decay all of the resources that he needs. A really solid tank line, a better support line, not an elite support line, but one that could be elite if those players are able to play to their peak. And he's got some really solid DPS players around him. This is Decay's team. He gets to pop off on the Tracer, on the Widow, on the McCree, whatever they need him to be good at. They can just enable Decay as much as possible, and this team will find success. That is the type of player Decay is. That is the level of consistency he brings. And the best thing with it is you have the pieces around him that you don't really have a hole at DPS. You can find a way to put Decay in pretty much in any situation. There's very few instances where you need to take him out. If for whatever reason there was like a double flex DPS meta, you'd want to take him out because he doesn't have a ton of flex DPS play. He's played Genji before, but there's better Genjis on this roster, which is saying a lot because Decay is very good at pretty much anything he plays. His Zarya is very good, obviously, as we saw last season, so that is something to keep an eye out for with Decay and how much they play him. He should be a mainstay on this roster. Maybe gets subbed out a couple times depending on maps or certain metas where maybe his strengths are not as prominent. But they have the pieces around him to allow him to succeed. First, they have the second hit scan DPS player on this team, which is Jerry. Last year, who was with the Boston Uprising. Now he has moved over to the Washington Justice. He's going to be their secondary hit scan. If they need to be running Tracer McCree, Tracer Widow, Tracer Ashe, this is their guy. He is the one who's going to play that secondary role. He also has the Reaper, which is pretty good. He has a Hanzo he can play. He also has a Sombra, which might come out. I know that some other people on this team can play Sombra. I think Assassin can play it, and Tuba can play it to a degree, but they have options here. There is some crossover a lot of these heroes that some of the players have, so you have that benefit as well, where you're not necessarily stuck with everybody being this one specific spot. You can find ways to move them around and use them in different ways, depending on the meta, depending on hero pools when we have that point in the season, so that is something of note. But Jerry, I think, will be that second hit scan player if they need to pair a hit scan with Decay's Tracer, most likely, or if for some reason there's, a Widow Ashe meta, or a double sniper, because Jerry can play the Hanzo at a high level as well, so that is something else that he can pull out at a pretty high level. Flex DPS players, I think the main starter we're going to see here is Assassin. They have Tuba as well, returning from last season. I think Tuba's a good player. I don't think he's a great player. I think that he has some heroes he's very good at. His Genji, his Pharah, his Doomfist are the heroes I expect him on the most. He's played Tracer in the past. He's played Hanzo in the past. You're not going to play Tuba over Decay on the Tracer. You're not going to play Assassin over Decay on the Tracer. Overall, I do think Assassin's going to be the primary flex DPS player. I was never too impressed with Tuba, with the exception of that Genji, composition that we saw in the Summer Showdown. We never really saw a lot from Tuba that impressed me, but Assassin is somebody who, in Contenders, on Runaway, alongside Mag, was a very good player. So once again, we're seeing this Justice team bring in pieces who've already played with each other in the past. Decay has played with Closer, so you have that synergy, and he played with Tuba last season. You have Mag and Assassin who've played together. You have Fury and Closer who've played together. You bring in all these pieces where most of them have played each other. Jerry has not. That's definitely something to take note of. Though he did have a stint with X6, which is where I believe Bebe played before he joined the before he joined the Hangzhou Spark. So actually, there is a bit of overlap there with Jerry. Bebe left in late 2018. Jerry joined actually after he left, so he did not play with Bebe. But there's a connection there. He may have at least had some kind of time in scrims. But Jerry kind of is that outlier where he doesn't really have a ton of experience with these other players, but you'll get it to work in a culture, I think, such as this one. Jerry is definitely a player you're going to bring in, and he can fit into this team very, very well. So this is a team that I look at and I think is very good. They don't really have a hole. They have a slight weakness at the support line. I think that their support line is a bit of a question mark, but it's not a problem. It's not a hole. They have support players. They have support players that can play the heroes they need to play, and they can play them at a high level. We've seen them find success in the Overwatch League, but they've had somewhat limited success, and they haven't been at their peak in a while. Now, circumstances can kind of determine that. Hangzhou Spark were a bit dysfunctional last season. The Dallas Fuel have been dysfunctional for 3 years, so there's a lot of things that kind of can be factors for why Closer got benched for Paintbrush. The culture was probably not right for a player like Closer to find success. Hangzhou Spark struggled a while last season. They never really got their footing. They had problems at DPS. They had problems at tank with people kind of having to getting injured or getting sick, and whole bunch of things happening that kind of really had impacts for what the team was able to do. But I think this coaching staff definitely has what it takes to really help this team out. They bring in Hokiri, who was the former general manager for the Seoul Dynasty. He was also a coach for the Seoul Dynasty as well. So he's going to be a personal coach to help a lot of these players out. You still have Supreme and Chilhua there as your main coaching staff for your head coach, and Supreme, Chilhua, your assistant coach. So this is actually a team that I feel pretty good in where they are. This is one of my favorite teams in the league this season. I think they are one of the best teams in general. I think they're one of the best teams coming out of North America in particular, of course, but I think they're one of the top teams in the league in general, and I think this is a team to look out for. They have the talent to compete with the best teams in the league. They have what it takes to compete at the highest level, right? They are a good enough team to beat the San Francisco Shock, the LA Gladiators, the Dallas Fuel. That is the level they need to be playing at and aiming for in North America. But they still have hurdles to cross, right? The San Francisco Shock are a really good team. Can they be consistently better than the Shock? It's difficult, but they have the talent to do it. They have arguably the best tank line in the league. Smurf and Choihoben is a very good tank line. Fearless and Hanban, a very good tank line. Are they the best? We don't know. But they have the potential to be the best. And they have the potential to have one of the best DPS lineups in the league, if not the best DPS lineup in the league. They have certainly an MVP candidate in Decay. Certainly Rookie of the Year candidate in Mag, and potentially Assassin, depending on how well he plays. So this is a roster that is very talented from top to bottom, with a very good head coach and star players. And that is what we need to see out of the Justice. Star players able to perform at a high level and able to win games for this team, to have those kind of game-changing moments where all seems lost and they just turn it up to that next level and find the victory. I'm really excited to see this team play. I think they're going to be a really fun team to watch. I think they're a really good team. And so I'm really ready for this season to start so we can take a look at the Washington Justice in action finally in the 2021 season. But that is it for me today. Those are my thoughts on the Washington Justice. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on this team, your opinion on my thoughts on this team, whatever you want to let me know in the comments down below. Please drop that down there. But that is all from me. Thank you once again. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more stuff like it. But I'm going to get out of here. I hope you all stay safe and stay healthy. And until next time, bye bye.